There are movies you watch once and forget, and there are movies that haunt you for a lifetime. Ghost is one of them, but strangely. Behind the love story between the living and the dead, there are a series of secrets that Hollywood has tried to hide. A scene that looks like an accident turns out to be perfectly staged. A role that almost never went to Patrick Swayze. And the sounds that send chills down the audience's spine actually came from something unexpected right on set. If you think you understand Ghost, you've probably only seen the tip of the iceberg. Today, we'll revisit 15 strange facts behind the film that made the world cry and perhaps make you look at it in a completely different way. If you find these behind-the-scenes facts interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss more strange and fascinating movie stories. When the king of nonsense comedy enters the world of tears. Before Ghost, the name Jerry Zucker was almost synonymous with madness. He was part of the legendary Zaz trio, the men behind Airplane and The Naked Gun, where audiences could see Leslie Nielsen defusing a bomb while delivering nonsensical lines. Or a sausage escaping in an action scene that no one could explain. That was Zucker's world, where comedy not only breaks down emotions, but deliberately tramples on them with absurdity. So when Hollywood heard he was directing a supernatural romance about love, loss, and the afterlife, the entire industry was stunned. A man who once turned seriousness into a joke was now telling a story about death and tears. It sounded like a deliberate mistake. Even Zucker wasn't entirely sure. He was initially skeptical of the cast, especially Patrick Swayze, too perfect. Too much of a leading man, too predictable. But that very skepticism led to a crucial discovery: comedy and tragedy. It turns out are not opposites. They are simply two sides of the same coin, the same pause before the emotion erupts. What makes the audience laugh is also what makes them choke, and Zucker chose the only way he knew best. No irony, no breaking, no avoidance. He told this story with complete seriousness, with absolute honesty. As if it weren't a movie, but a memory that needed to be told. The result: a film born from the hands of a man once associated with Hollywood's silliest jokes, became one of the saddest love stories the world has ever seen. Bruce Willis, the man who once didn't want to be a ghost, then became an iconic ghost. Around 1990, Hollywood almost had a dream come true. Bruce Willis and Demi Moore, the real-life power couple, appearing together in a supernatural romance. The idea sounded like it was a pre-written blockbuster, but Bruce Willis wasn't so enthusiastic. The problem was that his character was already dead, and for Willis at the time, who was building his image as a tough, smart, sarcastic guy after the success of Die Hard, the idea of spending most of the film playing a sensitive boyfriend ghost was hard to accept. He didn't feel he fit in with such a weak and passive role, and so he said no. That decision paved the way for Patrick Swayze, who brought something Willis chose not to portray: fragility but not weakness. A love both strong and tender to become the heart of the film, but fate always has its twists and turns. Just 9 years later, Bruce Willis appeared in The Sixth Sense, playing a man who was already dead at the beginning of the film. Though audiences only realized this in the final twist, the film was not only a huge success, but also became a global phenomenon. Ironically, the very role Willis had turned down became one of the most iconic roles of his career. He later joked that he had missed a big opportunity with Ghost, a very Hollywood way of saying he could have been both more famous and richer. When Crocodile Dundee almost turned Ghost into a completely different film. Imagine the famous scene at the Potter's Wheel in Ghost. Demi Moore is concentrating intensely, the lighting is soft, and the melody of Unchained melody plays. But behind her isn't the emotionally charged silence of Patrick Swayze, but Paul Hogan, the star of Crocodile Dundee, constantly cracking jokes about the afterlife, sending clay flying and creating an atmosphere that's completely unpredictable. It sounds strange, but it was once a very real possibility, during a period when Hollywood was unsure how to define Ghost. Many studios experimented with the idea of making it a lighter, more humorous version, and in that logic, The first name that came to mind was Paul Hogan, the man who, with his crocodile knife, had captivated global audiences with his humor and Australian charm. For them, Hogan was the perfect choice. A character who could turn tragedy into a joke, the supernatural into a wink-worthy adventure. Sam Wheat, instead of grieving the loss of his lover, could become a jovial ghost, cracking jokes about the afterlife and turning every emotional moment into a timely joke. The classic pottery scene might no longer be a romantic symbol, but a humorous segment between two friends, and the ending would certainly be much lighter. But that also meant the spirit of Ghost would disappear. No more pain, no more haunting silence. Just a supernatural film with a comedic twist. Luckily, Paul Hogan declined. He realized that the emotional depth of the story didn't suit his comedic style, and decided to step back. As a result, Ghost retained what made it legendary, a story not just to watch but to feel. Demi Moore, when not overacting, became the heartbreak that moved the world. In the late 1980s, tragic acting was often understood according to a very clear formula. The more pain, the more dramatic the performance. Crying loudly, screaming, trembling, smudged mascara, as if pain was only acknowledged when it was loud enough to fill the entire frame. But Demi Moore did the opposite in Ghost, in a film balancing love, the supernatural, and humor. Jerry Zucker needed a strong emotional axis to keep things from collapsing. And Moore was the one who played that role, but not with explosive force, but with almost terrifying restraint. She didn't turn pain into a performance. No screaming, no noisy collapse. Instead, Molly, her character, suffers in a very real way. Silent, rigid, as if her body no longer knows how to react to loss. In the scene where Sam dies in her arms, Moore barely acts. Her voice remains soft, her body still, but her eyes speak volumes. It's not the kind of grief the audience sees, but the kind of grief the audience must feel, silently following along. This restraint allows Zucker's camera to linger longer, without cuts to release the emotion, without music manipulating the viewer. Only one raw moment remains. A woman watching her loved one disappear forever. And the paradox lies there when Demi Moore try to make the audience cry. She makes them unable to hold back their tears. It is precisely this avoidance of overdoing it that has made Ghost a film that remains haunting even decades later. Unlike many melodramas of the time that easily become exaggerated and outdated over time. The pottery scene, a beautiful accident. Actually a perfect design. The pottery scene in Ghost has become an icon of 90s cinema, to the point that almost everyone from Generation X remembers it. Soft lighting, the melody of Unchained melody. Hands spinning on the clay, and the moment everything seems to melt in emotion. When the pot collapses, it feels like a perfectly real, accidental fall. And for years, Hollywood let audiences believe that it was a moment of magical chance. But that's not the truth. The scene wasn't accidental, nor was it a spontaneous improvisation between Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore. It was carefully planned, written, and staged by Jerry Zucker and his team, with a very clear goal: to create a moment where control is broken within the framework of control. They filmed it multiple times. Not just a single lucky take. Every movement, camera angle, and emotional timing was calculated so that the accident would happen at the right moment when the emotion had peaked, but still looked natural enough to appear unprepared. Interestingly, Demi Moore also played a crucial role in that authenticity. She practiced pottery for weeks before filming, to the point where her hands could move naturally in close-up camera space without needing cuts or a stunt double. The placement of the clay, the rhythm of the rotation, even the moment of imbalance were controlled down to the smallest detail. Therefore, the vase falling wasn't a mistake, but a carefully calculated moment to break the perfection at the right time. It forced the character to stop acting and begin to react genuinely: laughter, awkwardness, intimacy. And here's the paradox. What's supposed to be the most natural accident is actually one of the most meticulously crafted moments in the entire film. But it's precisely this sophisticated staging that makes it more authentic, and therefore more memorable. Tony Goldwyn, a lifelong villain hated simply because he acted so well. Carl Brunner in Ghost wasn't the loud, easily recognizable villain. He didn't wear a mask, didn't laugh maniacally, and didn't perform the typical cinematic acts of evil. What made him far more dangerous was his approachability. A close friend, a trustworthy partner. The kind of person who always stands by you until they stab you in the back. It was precisely this ordinariness that made the character of Carl unforgettable. And because he was so convincing, Tony Goldwyn, the actor who played him, inadvertently carried the character's shadow into real life. Years after the film's release, he recounted that audience reactions sometimes extended beyond the screen. Strangers looked at him with wariness, restaurant staff were sometimes cold. And there was even a story about a waitress refusing to take an order simply because Carl Brunner had done something terrible to Sam Wheat in the film. That speaks volumes. Carl isn't scary because he's evil in a cinematic way, but because he's so much like someone everyone has met in real life, polite, trusting, always having a reasonable reason for his actions. And that's why the betrayal hurts more than any scream. Goldwyn's performance is successful in that. He doesn't turn Carl into a monster, but into an ordinary person making a wrong choice in silence, with the terrifying confidence of someone who thinks they're always right. It's this subtlety that makes Carl the everyday nightmare of the 90s, a villain who doesn't need exaggeration to be memorable, and sometimes even mistaken for the actor in real life. And in an interesting paradox of cinema, being hated by audiences in real life becomes the highest praise for a villain played so convincingly. Patrick Swayze, the man who saved the role and changed Ghost. Initially, Patrick Swayze in Ghost was expected to be just a handsome face. Appear, be romantic, be profound, complete the love story, and then retire. But Swayze wasn't just an actor who fit that mold, he was also a powerful voice in the film. When the role of Demi Moore was considered, Hollywood was hesitant. Whoopi Goldberg was then a respected stand-up comedian and stage actress, but not a safe choice for a supernatural romance blockbuster. The studio didn't know where to place her within the commercial structure of a major film. Swayze thought differently. He believed Goldberg was key to balancing the entire story. Her humor, skepticism, and everyday energy would make the supernatural element feel more real, rather than turning it into a joke. According to many on the film crew, he even insisted that she audition, and was prepared to forego the role if she was rejected. The pressure from a star at the height of her career forced the studio to change its mind. Goldberg was invited to a script reading with Jerry Zucker and Swayze. Immediately, a connection emerged, not a staged emotion, but a natural reaction between three people who saw the same truth in the story. The result went down in history. Whoopi Goldberg won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress, and her role as Demi became an integral part of Ghost. The line, "Molly, you ray in danger, girl," not only became iconic, but also endures for one simple reason. Patrick Swayze saw the character's value before Hollywood even realized it. Whoopi Goldberg Oscar win after 50 years of silence. When Whoopi Goldberg's name was announced at the 1991 Oscars, the entire audience not only applauded, but almost held their breath. It was a moment of historical significance, as if the film industry had just closed a gap that had lasted more than half a century. And that's not an exaggeration, but the cold reality of the numbers. Since Hattie McDaniel in 1940 with Gone with the Wind, there had been 51 years without a black actress winning an acting award. Therefore, Whoopi's win in Ghost was not just an award, but a milestone marking the end of a silent period, half a century of unfulfilled opportunities, almosts, and promises of next time will be different. What makes it even more special is that she didn't win with a central leading role, but with Demi Moore, a character initially seemingly meant only for comedic effect, an eccentric woman outside the main love story. In the hands of others, she might have been just comic relief before disappearing. But Whoopi transformed Demi into a lifeblood of the film. Amidst a story filled with death, betrayal, and darkness, she breathed life into the film, allowing the audience to laugh at the right moments. And then, when tragedy returned, it descended with far greater intensity. She didn't break the film's tone, she kept it from becoming overwhelming. And most impressively, her ability to shift tone is remarkable. When Sam enters Oda Me's body to dance with Molly, Whoopi is no longer performing comedy. All the exaggeration vanishes, leaving only a strange stillness in her eyes and body, as if another soul were truly present. That moment transformed Oda Me from a comedic character into the emotional anchor of the entire story. And that's why Oda Me isn't Ghost's love story, but it's the reason it actually works. Patrick Swayze, the actor who won the role with genuine emotion. Patrick Swayze was hardly the first choice for Ghost. Director Jerry Zucker was initially quite skeptical, as Swayze had just risen to prominence as an action and romantic star in Roadhouse and Dirty Dancing, someone too cool, too physically imposing, not the kind of actor who could carry a supernatural story full of emotion and loss. Zucker wanted someone softer, more introspective, someone who could express vulnerability rather than just impress with looks or dance moves. He even watched Roadhouse to assess Swayze and left the theater with clear skepticism. But Swayze saw something different in the script. Not the supernatural element, but the core themes of love and separation. He proactively sought the role. And when given the opportunity, he immediately chose the most emotionally charged scenes to read, especially the final farewell between Sam and Molly. During the audition, he appeared completely unpretentious, without any flashiness or action star persona, focusing solely on emotion, and what happened in that room almost changed everything. The entire crew fell silent. Many were moved, and Zucker himself realized he had made a mistake. But what made this role even more special was what happened afterward. During filming, Swayze carried his own very real emotions, at times rekindled by personal memories of loss, making Sam Wheat's pain no longer just acting. Therefore, Sam in Ghost is unlike a typical cinematic character. He embodies the feeling of a real soul, heavy, silent, always trying to let go but unable to. And in the final scenes, when Sam says goodbye, it's not just lines from the script, but a genuine sense of parting that permeates every frame. This role not only brought Swayze success, but also became proof of a simple truth. Sometimes, the best person isn't the first choice, but the one who makes the entire film crew feel like they're no longer watching an acting performance. And perhaps what makes Ghost endure so long isn't just a single scene, a single song, or a single outstanding performance, but the way all those pieces come together to create a deeply human emotion. Love, loss, and letting go. Behind the cinematic lights, the behind-the-scenes stories, or the Hollywood secrets, what ultimately remains is a very simple feeling that some things, even if they no longer exist, can still touch us in the most genuine way. Ghost isn't just about a soul trying to stay in this world. It reminds us that there are memories, loves, and moments that will always remain, no matter how much time passes. And if you followed the video this far, you probably understand why a film released in the 90s is still talked about, rewatched, and feels as alive as ever. If you enjoy behind-the-scenes stories like this, don't forget to leave a like, a comment on the segment that impressed you the most, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. Thank you for watching and see you in the next story.